Hi, everyone. We want to welcome you to Tapping the Wine Cellar, and we're so sad that we are not able to do our Facebook Live today. But Tim and Father Keith and Vicki are going to discuss the readings for Holy Thursday. And we hope that you found on our Facebook pages that you could ask questions or comments, make comments about the readings for this evening. And we will be checking Facebook and trying and address some of those as we go along. So, Father Keith, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, hello and welcome to everybody. Glad to have you with us. In looking at Holy Thursday, I think it's good to kind of set the scene in our minds because Jesus' disciples have found this upper room, spacious room, nice place. It probably has a U-shaped table in it. That was common for meals at the time. They would have reclined at table, which meant they would have been lying on their sides with their heads toward the table and their feet out behind them. They would have been served from the open end of the table. Whoever was playing the servant role that night would have been putting food in front of them as well as drink and whatever else they happened to need. The tradition of washing feet would have happened before people got into the banquet hall. That was a custom that was provided at the doorway when you entered for a serious meal, and it would have been performed by servants. It wouldn't have been done by the host himself. So for Jesus to get up and do this in the midst of the banquet was unique. And furthermore, they wouldn't have been sitting on a chair with someone in front of them. Jesus would have been behind them, which would have been also out of the ordinary. It's a situation, you could say, that prefaces Jesus' self-emptying over these 3 days. It prefaces the passion in some way, but we're not going to get there yet. It's amazing to think how they would have responded to this. There are two responses that strike me. One is Peter, who Peter is typically trying to ride the whirlwind, you could say. I mean, first he says, no, don't do it, don't do it. And then he says, okay, do it, and then watch everything else do. Let's just go all one way or go the other way. Later on, he's going to make this big profession, I will never deny you, even if I die with you. And then he denies Jesus 3 times. He's in Gethsemane with a bunch of professional soldiers. He tries to draw a sword. Gosh, wouldn't that have looked really stupid? How hopeless. Take on a platoon of armed men with a sword. And Jesus says, put up your sword. So we have Peter, and we could kind of identify with Peter because a lot of times we feel out of control or we're trying to ride the winds or whatever. And then there's Judas, who we don't have his reaction, but it's really wondering what his motivations are. There's a theologian by the name of William Barclay who said that Judas probably believed in Christ's message and believed he was the Messiah, but he wanted to trigger the events. He thought that turning Jesus in would make him unveil his power, and that he would have to stand up and throw the Romans out and get everything going. And I think this is a temptation for us too. I mean, we want to make God do what we want God to do. If we can push the timeline forward, we want to do that. In some ways, that's what our society encourages us to do. We're supposed to be initiators. We're supposed to be self-starters. And so it's kind of easy for me to see Judas in that light. And I think it works because, in fact, the crippling depression that Judas has later after he's realized what he's done, and he realized he's done exactly the wrong thing. So this is where I'm at with the beginning. And so I've time to turn it over to you guys.
As I was looking at the gospel and reading some commentaries and things, I tripped upon something I had never read before regarding this gospel. We always learn Holy Thursday, the two big things, the foot washing, the institution of the Eucharist, and that's coming from my liturgy background. But one of the commentators wrote that in this gospel, in John's gospel, the writer never mentioned the word Eucharist. He talked about, and instead he spent his time describing the washing of the feet. And what an amazing interconnection that is with people, especially in this time that we find ourselves in, where we as a Catholic world today cannot partake in the Eucharist. But how do we wash each other's feet? How do, in the world of social distancing?
When I read this gospel, one of the things I was thinking about was the 2 years I lived in Kathmandu, Nepal. And Nepal and I believe this is true in most of South Asia, there's a common understanding of the feet as being both the figurative and literal lowest part of your body. So one of the things that people would do is that they would, if they came upon an elder or someone who is highly respected, they would touch their forehead and then point to the person's feet. They would sometimes even bow to the person's foot and touch their foot, giving a sign of like, this is my head. You are so much above me. You are so much more valued than me. And I value that much that, the highest part of my body is actually lower than the lowest part of your body. That's how much I value. And along with that, during the first Holy Thursday Mass while I was in Nepal, they were washing the feet. And one of the things I was reflecting on is how dirty my feet were and how dirty everybody's feet were. Everybody wore sandals, or most people wore sandals because both they were not very expensive. They were also easy to take on and off because when you went into someone's house, you were supposed to take off your footwear. And then what would happen is, especially in March or April when Holy Thursday usually is, it was really dry and it got really dusty. And so people's feet would just be caked with dust, and mine would too. And in fact, I'd have to wash my feet every night in our bathtub just to, before after I came in from going out, because it was just that dirty. And it really took on the foot washing took on a whole different meaning for me, with both those things in mind. That, number one, that someone who is supposed to be a leader, the person who's supposed to be in charge, the priest would come and wash somebody's feet whose feet were, number one, that they were lowering themselves that much to someone else and showing that sign of what a servant should be and what a leader should be as a servant. And then also that it was something that, number one, felt refreshing because you're getting all that dirt and grime off your feet, but also that, like, that's kind of gross to be the person who's doing that. And I imagine that Jesus' apostles, when they're having their feet washed, that was something similar that they had. They were people who were walking all the time. They were people who were, in most likely uncovered, in footwear that did not cover their entire foot. And as a result, their feet were probably really gross. And here is the Son of God, one of the members of the Holy Trinity, down there washing somebody's feet, and it's just so beautiful to me. And that's I think as Christians we're called to emulate that, and show that kind of love for someone else, that we would lower ourselves and also do something that is really kind of gross.
This morning, or for me it was morning, when I was watching the Pope preach at Holy Thursday Mass in the Vatican. And he made a point that I thought was really fascinating. He said, we have to allow the Lord to serve us. And I think it goes to what you were saying, Father Keith. We're not used to that. We think, oh, no, please don't serve me. But we have to allow the Lord to serve us. And it is only then that we receive his gifts. And I think we get confused with the whole idea of service in that respect.
Oh yeah, and it's far tougher for any of us to be served than to serve. I mean, yeah, I gladly wash 200 feet than have my own feet washed. And speaking as someone who's been through a long hospitalization and illness and recovery, boy, having the things you have to have done for you are potentially a huge embarrassment. And you don't want to admit you have people helping you with the basics of life, but thank God for that. And that's a call to the depth of service we're called to have with each other. I think today that all of the people who are taking care of us, the staff here at Our Lady of Mercy that come in every day, all of the delivery men, all of the public health workers, all the folks that are keeping our society going today, here and now, are foot washing. Absolutely.
The other thing that I read that I found very interesting was that Jesus knew what was about to happen to him. And yet he didn't focus on that. He didn't say to everyone, hey, get your act together because I'm about to leave this world. He said he focused on the other. He focused on the people. He focused on the disciples. And that I found, very interesting to reflect upon.
Vicki, to follow along with that point, it's not explicitly mentioned in the text, but it is implied there that because Judas had not betrayed him yet, but Jesus knew it, and he knows that Judas is going to betray him, that he even he washes Judas's feet, knowing what he's going to do.
I think that's an important point for some of our attitudes today, because we tend to want to exclude people from help because they don't deserve it. Well, if anybody didn't deserve to have his feet washed, it was Judas. And yet Jesus did it anyway. And as Jesus says at the end of the gospel passage, what I have done is to give you an example. What I have done, you should do also. And I think that's a big challenge for all of us.
The older I get, the more I appreciate the disciples, because I think, as a cradle Catholic, we never understand what the gospel says. We hear the words, but we don't really get what the meaning is. We have to live into that reality. And so as an adult, I have a whole different perspective regarding the act of foot washing. I can remember as a little kid sitting in Mass, and all the kids at Holy Thursday Mass, we would, much to the disgust of our parents, start giggling as people's feet were getting washed. And young adults, if you ask them, can we wash your feet at Mass? They're like, oh, no. I haven't had, my favorite response was, I haven't had a pedicure, so I can't have my feet washed. And now, like you say, Father Keith, if you've ever been where you need help, or you have allowed to someone the grace to serve you, you realize how significant that foot washing is. Sorry, I didn't mean to take the world away by the pedicure comment.
That's okay. That's where we are now. And I think that's important for us to realize where we are now. I agree with your identification with the disciples. I think that might be intentional on the gospel writer's part, because the disciples, particularly with Mark, but the disciples are always shown as not really getting it yet. They obviously got it eventually, but they didn't get it while they were walking with Jesus. They were with him all the time and seeing everything he did and listening to everything he said, and they still weren't getting it. And it took all of the events of Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and onward. I think that's true of all of us too. I mean, we shouldn't be ashamed if we don't get it all. I think if we ever get there, then it's time for us to check out of this world. But I think that Imitation of Jesus is the most important part for a Christian. I think that's displayed abundantly here in this the story of washing the feet.
Father Keith, to follow along with that comment, I think I identify with Peter a lot, and the other especially, but the other disciples as well, because they don't get it often, and I know a lot of times I don't get it. So it kind of makes me happy to see that people who were there in the present, in the immediate physical presence of Jesus, didn't get it.
The whole idea of service, though, like we had mentioned, Jesus washed the feet of Judas, the person who was about to betray him. What a challenge that is for all of us, because how many times have we, myself included, I'll be first on this list, I am a sinner, and I can hold a grudge. I can hold a grudge for a long time. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to wash these people's feet because they're okay, but I don't want to wash these other people's feet because I'm mad at them. What a challenge that is for us, especially in the times that we live in.
Definitely. Joe Maslow made a comment about it this morning in his Lenten retreat, Holy Week retreat series, about two Quaker neighbors that were arguing over the course of a creek. And the way they reconciled was one of them decided to go across the creek and out of the blue wash his neighbor's feet. And then they were able to pull things together again. So, by the way, that's a plug, Joe.
And not to plug the Pope, but in his homily, one of the phrases that he used was, "We have to be courageous to forgive." And I had never put courageous and forgiveness in the same sentence before. And I realized how powerful that is.
It sure as heck takes courage to forgive. Absolutely, because in a sense, having the courage to forgive means that you're going against your lived experience. Because we'd say, hey, somebody's hurt me. Our first assumption is they're going to hurt me again. And how do I protect myself from being hurt again? Forgiveness isn't the obvious road for that.
He also said that we have to let Jesus wash our feet because we can't, and I talk about connecting to baptism. We can't grow, we can't pardon others if we don't allow Christ to be within us. The last phrase he used, and the one that stays with me, is, we become tabernacles of Christ for each other. And again, in this day and age of social distancing, and who knows when we're going to have mass with real people again, how are we tabernacles for each other? I just have more questions. I have no answers.
That's okay. I am a believer that in asking questions, and that it's important not only to ask questions, but to keep asking questions, and particularly try to get to the right question. And because if we're not on the right question, we don't have a chance.
This morning when I was reflecting on things, I thought, for myself, this Triduum, the gift of this Triduum for me is, because we have the space of time, of people, of each other. I find I am not racing to Good Friday, which is what I would do when you go to Mass on Holy Thursday. It's like, okay, check. Now let's go on to the next one. Check. Let's go on to the next one. Check. It's like we can sit in that Holy Thursday moment in our period of social isolation, and hopefully tomorrow and Saturday and Sunday we will sit in each one of those paths. For me, it's been a much deeper experience than I've ever had.
Well, and tonight is like not only tonight, we've been sitting in Gethsemane for quite a while, you could say. We don't know what's going to happen. We're afraid of what's going to happen. There's terror in the wind, you could say. There's darkness. And we even have to worry about the lights because the soldiers would have been carrying torches and seeing those torches approach. Anxiety, which is definitely true of this pandemic. And anxiety, the not giving into despair, is so important. The big challenge of Gethsemane is keeping hope, and even Jesus has issues. Let this cup pass from me. So we don't need to be ashamed about our anxiety or fear. I think the only thing we have to be careful about is drawing swords.
No one's allowed to cut anybody's ear off. We can't with social distancing anyway. I'm going to be rude and see if there's any questions for us.
Tim, do you have any questions?
I have a lot of questions, but none of them are related to what we're talking about right now.
I've been trying to keep an eye on going between the 3 Facebook pages, and we don't have any comments other than thank you for posting later.
And the other thing we should reassure everyone, which of course, if you're at this point in the video, you will know that we are here and alive, and the video is posted. So, yeah.
I think it was Steve DeSantos who put on the Facebook for the province. He said that Gasper wrote, "Charity is the greatest sermon of Christianity."
Father Keith, you're open.
Yes, I would agree with that completely. I think that Gasper's got that right. He saw charity as the fountain of everything. We as missionaries of the precious blood are called to live in something called the bond of charity. That would be its own discussion, actually. But that's what Holy Week, that's what True to Him should call us to, is charity, absolute charity. Let me also append, we're here all the time. If you want to write us or make comments long distance or have any other things to talk to any of us or all 3 of us about, please feel free to use social media to reach out to us.
And it seems we're coming to the end of our discussion today. So I am going to say thank you for taking the time to watch this today. And like Father Keith said, if you have any comments, please add them in the comment box below. And if you have any questions or you have a need to speak to any of us, you can do that through our Facebook pages, or also contact us through the province website, which is preciousbloodkc.org. Thanks so much.